Hi folks, well I didn't expect to be doing a video so quickly after doing the folk music tag, but when I completed that I thought, why hasn't somebody done one on the world's greatest musical genre, progressive rock? So I thought I'll try one myself. I'll knock up some questions. But before I could complete that, Bill at the vinyl verse beat me to it. So I thought, sod that. I won't complete mine. I'll have a go at Bill's. So this is what I'm going to do. Promises to be a long one, so buckle in. Right, let's get started. First question is, what is the album that got you into prog? Now, I've told this story before, but back in early '73, I had no real interest in music at all. But then I heard this band on the radio because they had 2 hit singles in January of '73. And that was the Dutch band Focus. They had Sylvia, which got to number 2, and Hocus Pocus, which got to number 20, I think, in the UK charts. I absolutely loved them, and that started me down this whole great rabbit hole of not just progressive rock, but music in general. That's where my love of music started. So this is the album, the first album I think I ever bought. Not this copy. Unfortunately, my copy didn't survive the move to CDs. But this is Eruption from 1971. This includes Hocus Pocus and the magnificent track Eruption, which takes up the whole of side 2. Brilliant stuff. They've got a lot to answer for. Question 2. Show an album with 4 or less songs. Quite a lot to choose from in the prog genre, but I'm going with Helden's Stand By. This is from 1979 and was their final album until they briefly reunited in the late 90s. Helden were obviously formed by Richard Pinnis, and they were guitar and electronic band, quite extreme in places. I think probably an influence on some of the industrial bands that came later, though the music isn't industrial in itself. Harsh electronics, like I said. This, to my mind, is the best album they ever did. This is Stand By from 1979. Oh, sorry, it only has 3 tracks. Bolero, which takes up one side, the title track on the second side, and I can't remember the title of the second track, but 3 tracks only. There you go. Number 3, show an album on the Vertigo label. So I had to go with one of the greatest prog albums, or albums of any sort ever released, I think. This is Aphrodite's Child with their double album 666 from, I think, 1973. Obviously, Aphrodite's Child were a Greek band, though they formed in Paris, in France, and were obviously best known for the main guy, the writer, keyboard player Vangelis, who went on to a little bit of a successful solo career after this. And they also had Demis Roussos on bass and vocals, who went on to be something of a housewife's favourite Kaftan wearing house, my wife's favourite in this country, with a number of hit singles in the 70s. But this is a concept album based on the Book of Revelations, and it is superb. One that all prog fans should have in their collection. Next, nearly forgot. As we're on Vertigo, I wanted to show this CD, Vertigo Mixed by Andy Vortel. This is where Andy's taken, about 30 odd tracks from various Vertigo albums, snippets, and mixed them all together into a 70-minute suite, if you like. Absolutely superbly done. And I think if you're a fan of the Vertigo label and the acts that they had on, this is a must. That's Vertigo Mixed. Nearly forgot that. Next, show an album with epic keyboards. Now I wanted to show Rick Wakeman's Six Wives of Henry VIII, which is, to my mind, is an absolute classic of the genre. But Bill went and showed that, so I didn't want to try and compete with him. So I've gone with the album Trace. This is their first album from, when is it? 1974. Now, Trace were formed by Rick van der Linden, a great keyboard player who was in the Dutch band Exception before he formed Trace, who were known for their classic rock interpretations, classical music interpretations in a progressive rock fashion. This takes that on a bit, but focuses far more on the keyboards. Superb keyboard playing, organ, synths, mellotron, beautiful stuff. There are 3-piece with Jaffa Naik on guitar, and we have the great drummer Pierre van der Linden, Rick's second cousin, on drums. Rick van der Linden, obviously, from Focus. This is a brilliant album. They only ever did 3 albums. This first one is their best. Right. Question 5 is show an is this prog album? Now prog, probably like most genres actually, is easily identifiable for those bands right in the middle. But around the edges, it gets blurry as to what is prog, what isn't prog. So I've gone with a band that isn't really prog, but they did have prog elements at the time. This is one of my favourites, obviously, if you've seen any of my videos, the mighty Grateful Dead. And this is their, I think it's their 77 album, 1977, Terrapin Station. And the whole of side 2 is taken up by the title track and incorporates multi-part sections with orchestra and choir, very folky as well. It is pure prog to my mind, absolutely. And it's not even the full thing. If you ever get hold of, I think is it Jack of Roses by Robert Hunter, the lyricist, he does the full suite. But this is one of the few tracks I think that the Dead, even though they're known as a live band and they did superb versions of this, they never did it better than I think than is on this album. So for my mind, Grateful Dead, not a band you would think of as prog, but for this album, at least for the second side of it, definitely prog. And I would also make a case for their album Blues for Allah being progressive. It's their most fusion-based album, So it gets weird in places. So, like I said, I think there's an argument for this to be prog as well. So there you go, Grateful Dead, a prog band. Question 6. Show a prog album from an artist or band out of Germany. Well, you know, if you watch my videos, I've been doing a krautrock series. So and krautrock, to my mind, is a subgenre of progressive rock. A lot of people, when they think of prog rock, only think of symphonic prog, the the Yeses and the Genesis, the LPs. But prog, to my mind, covers from fusion to electronic to folk to krautrock to progressive folk to space rock, anything that's weird and wonderful. So I've gone for the more abrasive side of prog, and I've gone for Faust's very first album. This is an extraordinary album of it's hard to describe. This is very avant-garde music, a precursor again of probably some of the industrial bands, are very influential on a lot of bands, on bands like Nurse with Wound, etc. It's hard to imagine that the record company thought they were going to get a second Beatles when they signed Faust. No way. But this is an absolutely excellent album. Right. Next, show a prog album from an artist or band out of the UK. Well, it's seen as prog was considered to have basically started in the UK. We've got so many to choose from. But I've gone for one that incorporates the Canterbury scene and jazz rock fusion, and that is the great Soft Machine with their 1970 album, Third. The first album was pretty psychedelic in nature, though it had jazzy elements. The second album was very similar, but moved more towards the jazz sphere. By this time, they, I think, had started their jazz rock proper phase. This is a double album with one track per side. There's only one that really harpens back to their old, more psych-based numbers. That's Robert Wyatt's Moon in June. It was his last vocal performance on a Soft Machine album. But they went on to do some astonishing fusion music for my mind. But this is generally considered their greatest album. This is Soft Machine's Third. Right. Show a prog album from an artist or band out of North or South America. Well, I'm going to do both. No, I don't. Apologies to my American friends, but I don't think the Americans really got prog too much. They seem to prefer the punk rock of bands like Styx and Kansas. But there were exceptions, and one of them was the superb band, The Muffins. This is their second album from 1981. They formed in, I think, about 1973, but the first album didn't come out till 1978. They're very much a sort of Canterbury influenced unit, sort of a cross between the Softs and Henry Cow, very much in the RIO vein as well. This brilliant music. That's the album's called 185, if I didn't mention that already. And from South America is one I've shown before. I'll show it again. This is the Argentinian band Ave Rock with their Espacios album, their second album. Typical prog cover. They're very much in the symphonic rock vein, influenced by the usual suspects, mainly Yes, I think. But this is an excellent album, just been reissued on Svart, and I think the first album as well has been reissued, which I've got on order. Next up, what's the next question? What are we up to? Right, show a prog gateway album, one you would use to introduce someone to the genre. Well, again, I'm going to show two. One, because it has to be shown here, I'm afraid. Well, no, I'm not afraid. Because it is not only the greatest album ever produced, in my mind, and that's Yes is Close to the Edge. There's only one other album comes close to this, I think. This is an absolutely superb album. I keep saying this, all of them are. Like I said, not only is this the best album of all time, it also shows that the beauty and the power, the grace that prog at its best can achieve, which I don't think a lot of other genres actually get anywhere near. That's a bit controversial, but no, absolutely brilliant. But if that's a little bit too difficult, I would go for maybe Caravans in the Land of Grey and Pink. This beautiful cover. Isn't that superb? Because here, Caravan and another Canterbury band, here you get the sidelong track 9 feet underground, so you get that typical trope of prog rock music. But on the first side, you get 4 tracks of absolutely gorgeous melodic prog rock with whimsical lyrics, like I said, beautiful melodies. So there would be quite accessible to anybody, I think. So that's Caravans in the Land of Grey and Pink. Next, I think he's done this to get at Mazzy, but he said, show an album with Bill Bruford on drums. Even better if you can show albums from multiple decades and multiple bands. So here goes. Obviously, came to fame in Yes, and this is the album In the Beginning. This is an unofficial album. This is material taken from 1968-69 from BBC, Belgium TV and Swiss TV. So that's Mr. Bruford on drums in the 1960s with Yes. We then go into the 70s, and obviously he joined King Crimson from Yes, and this is their 1973 superb album, Like Stones in Aspic. Excellent. This is obviously the version of King Crimson with John Wetton, Bill himself, David Cross on violin, Jamie Muir on percussion, and obviously the master Robert Fripp on guitar. Also in the 1970s, he formed his own band, just called Bruford, and this is a live album from 1979. And on here, along with Bill, you've got Dave Stewart on keyboards, Jeff Berlin on bass, and as it says here, the unknown John Clark on guitar. Great fusion music. Next up, from, was it 1989? In all but name, this is Yes, but it's Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman and Howe, with the only album they ever did, though they did release a live album. This is a decent album, enjoyable. I saw them doing it live in Birmingham at the time. Excellent concert. I think it was better than what Yes themselves were doing around this period. So that's Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman and Howe. And finally, from the 90s, I think this was released in 1997, we have Project One with Live at the Jazz Cafe. Now, Project One, the projects were cut down versions of King Crimson with various lineups. This was Project One, and this was Tony Levin on bass and stick, Trey Gunn on guitar, Bill Bruford obviously on drums, and obviously Robert Fripp on guitar. So that's 4 acts, 4 decades. Mr. Bruford. Right. Show a concept album. There are so many in the prog genre. But I'm going to show probably the biggest, the greatest concept album of all time, and from one of the greatest bands in any genre, never mind prog, and one of my favourite bands, and that is Magma. Quite a large part of their oeuvre is a concept about the ecological and spiritual future of Earth, and takes a story of people fleeing the Earth for the planet Kabayan, and then returning many generations later to Earth, and the conflict then between themselves and the people of Earth. It spawned not only a number of different albums, but it spawned a language. So Magma obviously, or Christian Vander in particular, developed his own language, Kabayan, in order to sing the music. So basically there's 3 sagas. The first one is the Kabayan Saga, which takes up the first album, just called Magma, which is a double album, and this is basically the story of them leaving Earth. and it's continued. This is the return back to Earth on the second album, 1001 degrees centigrade. You then have the Kabayan Saga, which is made up of 3 albums. Just get them. You have KA, or Kabayan Anterior. You have Kabayan itself. And the third part of that saga, I can make sure I pronounce this right, Ementet Ray. Now, none of the thing is with Magma's sagas, they weren't always released in the correct order or recorded in the correct order. Often parts were played live years before they were ever recorded. And you then get the Foist Hamtak, probably the greatest part of these sagas, isn't it? And that goes across 3 albums, but Foist Hamtak itself, the first part, was only ever produced as a live piece, and it first was done on this album, Retrospective, volumes 1 and 2. The third part, I'm skipping the second for the moment, was Vertigo, and was used as the music for the film Tristan and Isolde. But the second part, which is the only album, as I mentioned before, that can compete with Close to the Edge as the greatest album of all time, that's Magma's Mechanic Destructive Commando. It's the first album I ever got by Magma. I've never having heard anything by them. I didn't know what to think. I'd never heard anything like it. I didn't even know if I liked it. But at the time, not having many albums, I kept going back to it and back to it. And now, like I say, I think it's one of the greatest albums of all time. Absolutely brilliant. And it's probably the one responsible for starting the whole Zoom style and of music, on that whole subgenre. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Right, that's that one. We're on to number 12. Show a female prog artist or band with a female lead. Right, I have gone for Catherine Ribeiro and Alpes with their album Pay. Now, they were a French band, I think formed by their guitarist and cosmophone player, whatever that is, Patrice Moulet, but they featured Catherine Ribeiro on lead vocals, and her vocals, she has a very deep tone, sounds a bit like Nico at times, or very melodramatic type of vocals, very theatrical, and the music is quite symphonic and psychedelic at times. But absolutely, this is probably their best album. They did a number of albums. This is their best. from 1972. Came out. So that's a female vocalist. Show a prog solo album. Someone who is in a prog band and released a solo record. Well, he's released more than one. He's had a whole career. And this is Peter Hamill with The Silent Corner and The Empty Stage. Obviously, Peter Hamill, best known as the vocalist, guitarist, piano player, and writer for the superb Van der Graaf generator. In fact, this is from 1974, and is virtual. But you could call it a Lost Van der Graaf album, given who's on it. But it has superb songs on it, like A Louse Is Not a Home, and A Louse Is Not a Home, Forsaken Gardens, superb. The Lie. No, his vocals aren't to everybody's taste, but I think he's one of prog's greatest vocalists. Next, show a favourite Roger Dean cover artwork or a favourite prog cover. Well, this might not be the best result, it's pretty close, but I wanted to show this album anyway. This is Green Slade with their first album. That's a beautiful colour, which I've got framed in one of the other rooms. This is a vastly underrated album and a vastly underrated band. Green Slade were a quartet, obviously, of Dave Greenslade, who had been in Colosseum on keyboards. They had a second keyboardist in Dave Lawson. They had Tony Reeves on bass and Andrew McCulloch on drums. One that everybody should have a listen to, because like I said, I think it's vastly underrated. But I also wanted to show this, and it's related to the next one. This is Dave Slade's The Pentateuch with artwork by Patrick Woodruff. Some beautiful artwork in this. Comes as it's a double album, but comes in a book format with superb drawings and artwork. This is something that Prog did particularly well. Excellent. Next, show a live prog album. Well, I was thinking of showing Yes Songs or Welcome Back My Friends to the Show That Never Ends, two superb triple albums, but I had to go with one of the greatest live albums, I think, of all time, and that's Hawkwind's Space Ritual. Absolutely stunning album. Like I say, they don't come much better than this in terms of live albums. Just try and show you what the inside. It's a great shame that this wasn't ever filmed at the time. It's one of the lost things of music. The whole cover falls out. Not brilliant. As I say, I think this is up there as one of the, if not the greatest live album ever done. I've missed a question, just noticed. Show a prog album released in 1971, as this is 50 years on from 1971. So I've gone back to the Canterbury scene for one of the very first albums I ever bought, and this is Gong's Camembert Electrique. Gong obviously hadn't been set up by David Allen, the Australian David Allen, who had been a founder member of Soft Machine. It says on the cover this is the first album by Gong, the Band and Family, recorded in France in 1971. But there was an earlier album called Magic Brother, which uses the Gong name as well. But this, I think this is stunning. It's psych, it's prog, it's got that weird Alan humour. Obviously, Gong are better known for the Radio Gnome trilogy, but this is like a precursor to that, I think. Great tracks like I've Been Stoned Before, You Can't Kill Me, Dynamite, and my personal favourite, Forhat Digs Holes in Space. On here you get Blumdido Baddergrass, Didier Malherbe on sax, Submarine Captain Christian Trish on Aqualung bass. You get the great Pit Pile on drums. You get obviously David Allen on guitar, or as he's known here as Bert Camembert. You get Venix Deluxe as Switch Doctor, Mixmaster, and you obviously get Gilly Smith as Shakti Yoni on Space Whisper. Brilliant album. Next, where are we up to? 17. Show the last prog album you purchased or were gifted. Well, just having arrived on Friday, I think, and I haven't had a chance yet to listen to it, is Symphony Number 1, Tonal Plexus by Glenn Branca. Now, he was an American avant-garde musician who wrote these massive symphonies for massed guitars and percussion, using a lot of repetition, a lot of noise. I've got one other album, Symphony Number 6, which is meant to be his best and is superb. So I'm looking forward to giving this a listen. As it says, it's music in 4 movements for multiple guitars, keyboards, brass and percussion. I think it links to the minimalist movement in that use of repetition, but far heavier and noisier. Maybe closer to Tony Conrad. Excellent. Really looking forward to giving this a listen later. So that's my latest purchase. There are more on the way. Show a prog album released within the last 25 years. Well, there's been so much great stuff. Not just the last 25 years, I'd say the last 5-6 years. There's been a lot. I think we're into not a golden age, a silver age of new prog. So I took this to mean an album released by a band from this period rather than a 70s band releasing something in the last 25 years. And I've gone with the UK band Regal Worm and their double album Pig's Views, which came out I think in 2018. Regal Worm are basically, it's one guy. It's the progressive rock project of Jared Gosling, who was in a electronic pop duo called I Monster, which I've never heard. He was also a member, I think, of Henry Fool, who did an excellent sort of jazz prog album. But this is incredible music. It's psychedelic. It's symphonic prog. It's got a lot of that sort of RIO feel as well to it. It features quite a lot of different styles of music within it. I think this is their third album. First two were only released on CD. This is the only one that's been on vinyl. But if you don't know them, check them out. They're really worth listening to. Excellent new prog band. Next, show a prog album with an incredible guitar solo. Well, I could have shown so many albums, but I could have probably been obvious. I could have gone with one of the three Steves, Howe, Hackett or Hillage. But I've gone a bit out of the way with this one, I think. And I've gone for the progressive folk album Lord of the Ages by Magna Carta with the Roger Dean cover. And on the title track Lord of Ages, which takes up about half of the first side, there after the sort of spoken acoustic start, it goes into an electric part of the song, and it features what I think is just a great guitar solo, which must have been played by, I think, either Chris Simpson himself, who's the leader of Magna Carta, or Stan Gordon. They were a trio at this point. Chris Simpson's on guitar and vocals, Glenn Stewart on vocals and spoken word, and Stan Gordon on guitar and vocals. I'm not sure who does that guitar solo, but I've always loved that. I think it's incredible. So that's Magna Carta with their album Lord of the Ages. And final question was, what prog album is at the top of your want list? I think if push comes to shove, I'd have to say Aki Maraikel's Echo album, or basically anything by Aki Maraikel from his krautrock period, with the exception of Grüne Reise, which I have. They're impossible to get. I mean, I just looked up before, you're talking about 700 quid for an original of Echo at the moment. I don't think they've been, since the early 70s, they've never been re-released. 2 or 3 years ago, there was a box set on CD of all these albums, and that gave us hope that he would get round to releasing the albums separately on vinyl, but since then nothing's appeared. So those are the ones I would love to have. Right. Okay, that got to the end and only taken 40 odd minutes. Could have done it longer. There's so much I've missed out. But thank you to Bill for coming up with this. Prog deserved it. I hope other people will take part. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're all doing well. Have a great week. Take care. Bye.